Welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast, featuring advice and interviews about athlete branding. Learn how marketing, public relations, and broadcasting can grow your brand. We also have special episodes to talk about recent news, events, and anything in the world of sports. The podcast is sponsored by Pliable, a versatile marketing, PR, and broadcasting company that identifies opportunities and creates tailored content for its clients. Now it's time to roll. Here's your host, Glynn.
Thanks, and welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast. In this episode, we're talking about athlete branding and more specifically, athlete stories. Today, our guest is Gabe Nason from Athlete First Media, and we're going to be talking about the importance of storytelling and for those athletes that might not get as much of the highlights or also the limelight that some of the other athletes might get. He is here to tell his side of the story and why he started his media company. For those of you not familiar with his company, he is from Athlete First Media. They've amassed over 2,000 followers on Instagram very quickly, and they are now over 1 million views. And he's also the father of a 2-year-old and certainly understands the role of family life as well. And Gabe, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about everything. The number has now even pinnacleized to over 3 million views on Instagram alone. So I'm really happy with how things are going. That's for sure.
Awesome. So let's talk about how you started this company, Athlete First Media, and really where the vision came from.
Yeah, I've worked in media now for, I think this will be my fourth, when the next season starts, it'll be my fourth season doing media. And I realized a trend pretty quickly about how athletes, specific athletes, weren't necessarily getting the limelight they should have gotten. There was people who were covering the big schools and there was people who were covering the small schools, but there wasn't necessarily anybody who covered it all. And then especially there wasn't anybody who was willing to, give the athletes their own shine. It was so much more about the team. And I say it a lot on my podcast is that to a lot of media members, it's the name on the front that matters and not the name on the back. And to me, that's very backwards. And so I started this thing to really put the athletes at the forefront. And part of that was me doing a podcast so that they could come here and talk about their life. They kind of be seen as something other than just a name on a roster. And then, having them interact with me and all that good stuff. And I do obviously the highlights and everything else.
And I know that a lot of the athletes really appreciate it too. I think especially at the high school level, which is, one of your primary areas of focus, you're really diving deep into highlights on a daily basis to get out there the athlete that may have had 4 hits in a game and 2 RBIs, and you've got this list of athletes, and it basically summarizes the day. And I know from covering high school sports, that's not easy information to get.
No, not even close. The baseball and softball season ends up being a little bit easier. It's game changer, so that makes it a little bit easier in that sense. But the lacrosse for this season, obviously, the lacrosse and track is me going out and finding as much information as I possibly can and releasing it. But yeah, a lot of teams also don't do game changer, which is hard too. So then it's a lot of me contacting coaches and stuff like that. But I love it, and it allows me to know everything that's going on in the state. And then I just kind of you create the connection. Like what I'm trying to do is create the connection for the other people who look at the stats and go, oh, wow, I can follow along with that person's season through this brief thing of stats. But it also allows me to do that as well, because then I know who's doing what. And then I kind of have an idea of what the landscape looks like. It makes going to games way more fun because I know who to look for and what to look for. So it takes a lot of work. When I first started doing it, it took around 9 to 10 hours a day to do all those stats because they just take a long time to put into it. These days, or towards the end of the season, on a long day, it was 4 or 5 hours. On a short day, it took 2 hours at most. So I was able to get faster at doing it, which helped a whole lot. But yeah, track is the hardest because it's
the lack of information.
The lack of information, and there's a million names, and unlike baseball or softball, you can't. I'm not gonna put just the first place finisher because the track is so much more than just who finishes first. So that one takes quite a while.
Yep. And obviously you do this year round. So talk to me about maybe your favorite sport or the one that you're most passionate about.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of changed over the years. When I was a kid, I was a huge basketball guy. Everything was basketball. I played basketball. And then as I kind of got older, I started to really love the spring sports, the baseball, the softball. Huge into those now, to the point where outside of high school and college, I don't pay attention to like the NBA at all. So basketball is very much so like in the back of my brain. But I've also like because I've covered so much in the past 4 years, I've really learned to love a lot of new sports. Lacrosse has been a fun one to get to know this past year, especially. Field hockey is an interesting one that I don't think nearly gets. I'm excited for as we get into the fall season. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I think are really interesting. And then like to me, there's the winter season is going to be encapsulated by basketball, but there is so much else going on as well. Um, I'm being a girl dad and having two older sisters. I'm a little bit more apt to the female side of things just because it's what I grew up with sisters and now I've got a daughter, so I get the attention that they don't get. Like I understand that. Um, and so like seeing that stuff is fun for me too. So I tend to gravitate towards the girl side of things just because they don't get as much press as the
Yeah.
boys side of things does. Um, and yeah, so it
Well,
keeps
I
me.
also think for you, that's a market, right? Like in the sense
Sure.
that that's the stories that aren't getting covered. Somebody else could probably pick up, the paper, read online, get that information, and it's fairly accessible. Where
Sure.
you're going, and I think also is something that's related to what you've done, obviously, with your work and the podcast and these interviews, is telling the stories that aren't getting told. So, like,
Yeah.
that's perfect, in my mind, brand alignment for you, which is on the, female side of sports, which Pliable is very passionate about, and obviously with Mission E50, the work that's been done to try and increase the popularity of women's sports. As a girl dad myself,
Yeah.
I totally understand what you're saying because I didn't really see it until I had my own daughter, and
Yeah.
I grew up as an only child, and so I didn't have those experiences like you said with sisters, and then I saw it with my own child, and I was like, whoa. This is a problem. And
Mhm.
so I love that you're doing that and really trying to help obviously these female athletes who deserve, as I always say, just as much of the credit as the male athletes do. And like we said, sometimes those stats aren't going to show up unless someone like you is really pushing it. So kudos.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, it's hard too because you also don't want to like go on the other extreme, right? Because I don't want to be like this. I don't want people to view me as somebody who doesn't like the male side of things because that's not the case. Uh,
Yeah.
but I just want to give the females more press because like they don't get any. I mean, if you look at like basketball, if you've ever been to any of the basketball tournaments, you go sit in the Cross Center or in the Augusta Civic Center or whatever it may be. You sit there and you look around during a boys' game, and that place is packed. There's barely a seat in the house. And for the same class, you then look for the girl side of things, and it's basically just the people who are at every game, anyways.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's the hard part for me because the male talent is obviously very high in Maine. I think the athletes in Maine in general don't get the respect that they deserve. Um, but I think if you look on the opposite side of that, the females are at a similar level, if not higher, like talent wise in comparison, like the levels that they're going to play at than the males, and they get significantly less coverage. And so like it felt like it needed to be balanced. This is
Yeah.
just it was
Yeah.
way too much.
I think it's equal opportunity, and I think
Yeah.
that's something that hasn't been done, and so that's why it sometimes feels odd to people,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. But I think shout it from the rooftops and keep doing what you're doing. So let's talk a little bit about why you enjoy or what makes, in your mind, a good athlete that has a story to tell. Because obviously, in the work that I do with athlete branding and NIL and all these things, I always say it comes down to storytelling, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's unfortunate sometimes when teams have built this culture about, team first, which is absolutely true,
Yeah.
but it's almost made it so that athletes don't want to tell their story
Correct.
because they don't want to stand out when in fact, I work with athletes that want to cure cancer or have type 1 diabetes, want to give back through charitable endeavors, to want to talk about mental health. Like sometimes they don't feel like they want to speak up because they don't want to take away from the team when I feel like that actually enhances the value of the team. If your teammates know what you're passionate about and they can help rally around you, if you want to cure cancer, or if you want to, tackle mental health, like they'll help you with a fundraiser. Like, I think there's just so much more that can come from an athlete talking about their story than obviously not.
Yeah, no, 100% agreed. And like I said earlier, like that's so much about like the media has driven it into that, but also like the people that are in media have grown up here, most of them at least, and so they've had that driven into them since they were young. Was it's all about the app and it's all about the team, like team first, all team, and like I say it a lot. Is like a team is huge. Having a collective team that works together well is how you win a lot of games. But a team's also made up of individuals. Each individual person on that team adds to it in their own unique way. And if you just devoid them from that, you're killing. I mean, you're killing like their personality. I mean,
Right.
you're not allowing that person to be themselves. So my side of things was, okay, there's athletes out here that I know are very talented, but I also know that they are human on the other side of that. Like
Yeah.
they have so much going on. And then the one I mention a lot to anybody who asks me about who my favorite guest might be or whatever is I had Addison Atherton on, who is an amazing basketball player at Ellsworth, amazing track athlete, but that part hadn't been talked about for her. She's going to play collegiately track, but because she played basketball, it was a bigger thing.
Yeah.
And so I had her on because I everyone seemed to love her. Like watch the team, and the team gravitates towards her. She's a leader in a lot of ways. She's a huge part of what they've done over there. And I've never seen anybody really interview her. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. I want to communicate. And so for me, it's we're gonna have a conversation first because I need to gauge how you're feeling. Like if you're not really gonna have a conversation with me in the first place, probably not gonna work on a podcast.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but she was just silly. She was having a good time when we were just talking about sports. And so I was like, okay, would you be willing to come on my podcast? And she was like, yeah, I'd love to. And then that podcast is it's an hour and a half of just like filled of joy and fun. And we didn't take ourselves seriously at all. But the amount of people that I had reach out to me and be like, wow, that was so cool to see like who she is, because she kind of gives this like I'm a bad B type of personality on like when she's on the court and on the track. She's just like very strong woman. And so people kind of got put off by that. And so I think people were like hesitant. But then seeing that podcast and she's having a good time. We're talking about random things. I mean, I put out a reel of her. We talked about bones for about 20 minutes because she loves to bone collect. And so it was fun. And so like giving that aspect of her, now people will look at her as, oh, I want to cheer for this person. Like this person seems like a genuinely nice person. She's going in, she wants to go into ROTC at UNE, wants to enlist and do time in the military. So like she is just a very well-versed, well-rounded person. So much more than just a player that stepped on a basketball court. And so being able to tell that story for her was so cool for me, because then I ended up just sitting there just like listening. I forget that I'm doing a podcast. I'm sitting here talking to her, and that's happened a lot. Anna Stevens I had on from Ellsworth as well was another one like that. A million of them. There's so many great podcasts that I've done with people who have been very fun to have on it, and to be able to tell their story and give them a chance to be like, this is who I am. Like you start to see their personality, and then think about like professional athletes. What makes you cheer for a professional athlete
Right.
isn't
Exactly,
how
yep.
good they are. You like certain aspects of them. Maybe you have a little bit of swag. You like the swag they have. Maybe they do things off the court that you love, that you want to support. It's so much more about the personalities. You kind of forget with professional athletes that they're athletes. They like the line melds. You think that they're your friend, or you kind of get that like connection with them just through whatever means that may be. And so I felt like that was important for high school athletes as well, because some of these athletes aren't going to go play collegiately, and whether that be because they don't want to or whatever it may be. But so they need a voice. Give them a chance to talk about what they want to talk about and get their who they are outside of sports out there, so people can cheer for them when they enter into whatever sport it is.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the other thing too is that, as this being an athlete brand advisor podcast, I want to try and help with some advice here for athletes.
Yeah.
When they come on your show or when you look for a guest, talk to me about what you're looking for, an athlete.
I mean, the first thing obviously is like you are putting yourself out there too. Like I'm not gonna choose somebody who doesn't have social media. Not because like that's this not because I'm like, oh, I want them to share everything, but like it first of all shows me that you're interested in having your own brand. Um, if you don't post a single thing about the sport you play, like it obviously isn't that big a part of your life. So like I don't feel like you want to come on a
Or
podcast
you might
and
not
talk.
be willing to share, right? I mean, that's the
Correct.
other thing. You need people who want to share, their
Correct.
stories. So yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
exactly. And so like that's a huge thing to obviously look at. Obviously like I I which it always sounds so conceited to say, and I've said it on the podcast before, but I want good athletes. Like everybody will have their time because time goes by and other players will come through and it'll circulate. But I want people who are going to be that people are interested in because
Mm.
but also like in the same way you want people who don't necessarily have a name yet because then I can give them the name they deserve. Greta Krantz is going to come on my podcast. She's from Westbrook. We tried to do it last night. The internet was not having it, and so we're going to redo that podcast. But she's one of the best hitters in general in Class A this year. Plays for Westbrook. They didn't really have a great year. They made the playoffs and then lost, but I think most everybody makes the playoffs in A. So it was a disappointing year for them, but she's still a fantastic athlete, just a freshman, and one of the best, if not the best hitter in all of Class A this year. Probably give that to Julia Pike because she's been amazing, but she's one of the best. And so, like her to not like she's never had exposure. There's never been anyone talking about her because she's just a freshman, and
Right.
we don't pay attention to middle school sports at all in this state. So, um, it's just yeah, it's interesting. So then you like to have her on was super like well, when we redo it, it will be super cool because she's just a small platform person, but she loves what she does, and you can tell, and that's all over her social media, and she's a great player. So the mix of things really works for me. And then obviously, if you're interacting with my stuff,
Mm.
that's a huge tell to me because then it shows that you're interested in what I'm doing, which
Right.
then means you also like want to be able to tell your story without telling me you want to tell me, without
Yeah.
telling me that you want to tell your story, you're telling me. Because
Right.
if you're liking my story or reposting my stuff on your page or even like messaging me and be like, oh, like this is great, like this is super cool. I really appreciate it. It's you without you saying it, it's you reaching out and saying, okay, I'm really interested. I want this thing to be a thing. Um, and so like to have that ability to be a little bit outward and be like, okay, I'm gonna take the chance. That's huge to me because again, like you said earlier, like some athletes aren't sure about doing that. So if you're gonna take that step, I'm gonna reward you for taking that step because that's so hard, like you said,
Mm.
to do is to take that first step and be like, okay, I want this to happen. And I think if I can be a small part in changing the culture of this team first, team only, no personality type of culture that we have in Maine with sports, I'd love that because if then I can get athletes who feel comfortable doing that, then they start to do things. Then the media starts to become athlete first, which is kind of
Right.
ironic, but like where the athletes feel like they can then go and do their own thing. I talked to you a little bit a while ago now, I think, about a podcast that these couple of kids do. I think two are in high school, two are in middle school. They do a podcast. It's a basketball podcast down in Southern Maine, and it's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I would love for that to be all through the state of Maine. I mean, look everywhere else. I mean, who doesn't have a podcast these days? If
Right.
you're a name, why
Well,
don't
the other
you?
thing I think we're battling here, and I think you identified a little bit earlier, is not only are we dealing with the idea about this team first kind of culture, but I also think that when we talk about athletes specifically here in Maine, where obviously you're based, is that there are a lot of athletes who are very humble. And they also sometimes don't feel like they, again, I don't like this phrase, but it's become a thing. And I think you know exactly what I'm going to
Yep.
say, which is just a kid from Maine.
Yep.
And I don't like that at all because you're already degrading yourself. You're just saying you're not as important. You're not some of these other people. What I always say, you need to be a proud athlete from Maine. And I think we have an amazing opportunity with Cooper Flag that is hopefully going to put Maine on the map a lot more than it was. So that then people will realize, we can have the best of the best literally come from this state. And to say that you're just a kid from Maine is really not the best brand positioning. And we have so much of a better brand as far as hard work ethic, people who are willing to, work long hours, they're blue collar. Like that's what Maine needs to be about. And I think our athletes reflect that. And I just want to be able to try to change that narrative.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've I've met so many kids from Maine who, like you said, say that they're like, "Oh, I'm just a kid from Maine. What's gonna happen?" And like, or it's like,
or I don't think I can do it because I'm just a kid from Maine.
Correct. Exactly. And so like that definitely needs to shift. I mean, like if that's going to be the identity we have, no one's ever going to make that here.
Exactly.
And so to have like a Cooper Flag, it gives you the opportunity. It's right now, if you're asking my opinion, there is no better time to be a Maine athlete looking to build a brand than this exact time. Because
I agree.
Every eye is on Maine because Cooper. And the second that he gets within the next few months, once he gets drafted, and then things start to happen for him, the eyes will be on us tenfold than they were before. So building your brand now so that when people start looking is going to be huge because they're already kind of looking. But once he starts to do what he's going to do, I think it's going to build even further. And so if you want to be that next Cooper Flag, which is obviously going to be an awful term for probably ever now, everyone's going to be looking for the next Cooper Flag from Maine.
Hey, it gives them something to look up to, and you're going to be the best of the best. So
for sure.
It's the complete opposite of just a kid from Maine. Honestly,
quite literally. Yeah. I mean, he quite literally embodies that statement in the opposite way. Like he is just a kid from Maine, but he's doing the biggest thing ever. So like,
I also think too, we talked about women's sports, but you look at Mackenzie Holmes, you look at somebody like Max Murray playing for New York City FC. You look at Caleb Manuel turning pro. Like, as you said, this is the time, and there are wonderful athletes here, and there's also some really great people in our state that you can do both. You don't have to be one or the other. You can do both. I think that's a key message here from Gabe and I today. So
100%.
All right, let's wrap up here with kind of what's ahead for you. What's your vision here with Athlete First Media, and what do you want to see more of? And pitch your podcast to some of the athletes that are obviously out there listening.
Yeah, I mean, the future it's coming quick. I'll tell you that much. The past week and a half has been everything's on an accelerator. I think people who weren't paying attention to what I'm doing are paying attention now. I'm hoping by the time this comes out, there will be an announcement. But I'm starting a sector of some athlete podcasts, helping them do all that stuff. People who wanted to be a part, like reached out to me, hey, I'm going into college to be sports media. Do you have any opportunities for me? And then picking where they want to go. One of them is Ashton, and I would butcher his last name, so I'm not even going to try it. But he's got his first episode happening this Friday, and so that'll be huge for him to have that chance. He's going to college to be in sports media while also playing lacrosse, and so like that's the next step for me. Working with Jenny Witten, who's a former guest of mine, to start her thing as a softball side of things. She loves sports and wants to be able to keep doing that outside of when she's playing. Obviously, she's been hurt the past couple of years and been missing that itch to be in sports. So giving her an avenue to do that, and it prepares her for when she's done playing sports that she can still have that path. That's the next thing for me, obviously. I'm really hoping to do a lot of bigger things as time moves on, a lot of things in the works. I'd love to do some like charity events as well. Trying to be more than just this sports media company that you go to for information. but really being somebody that can make a difference in the lives of those athletes that are in Maine. Yeah, so just trying to make the next step be the next step. I'm a super like right now in the moment type of guy. Obviously like the regional title games for all baseball and softball are today, so that's a whole thing that's happening today. But yeah, so it's just trying to get one step closer to the goal, which is making an impact, being a hub for these athletes to come in and tell their story. And the podcast does that, and we're booked out until I think like July 17th right now. And my books don't go much further than that. So I'm very excited for what's to come. Obviously, the thing that I expect will be the hardest issue as we turn the page on the spring season will be a lot of what I have right now is following is the spring athletes. Then it's going to be moving into fall, and how do I get those people on? And so that'll be the next challenge to tackle once this whole spring season's over. But I don't think any of those athletes will have any trouble coming on a podcast talking about football or soccer. But that's the next step, is finding those players who want to have conversations and just diving deeper into that.
That's great. How about how can people follow along? Where can they find the podcast?
Yeah, so we're everywhere. Instagram at Athlete First Media. I don't think there's anything weird about that. I'm pretty sure it was available. And then Facebook at Athletes First Media as well. We have a YouTube channel. I'm the worst at uploading my podcasts to YouTube directly because it's a whole pain in the butt. It takes like 5 hours to download because it's so much footage. But I try to do that. That's also Athlete First Media. Spotify is, again, Athlete First Media. I think on Spotify it's every word is capitalized. I think I did, with spaces in between. And then yeah, I think that, I mean, you can get the podcast anywhere, and it's under Athlete First Media. So anywhere you get podcasts, Amazon, all the good stuff, SoundCloud, Apple Music, all those ones, it's out there to find that stuff. The podcast is everywhere. We do 4 episodes a week usually. Keep myself pretty busy with that. Always having new athletes on, and again, whereas we exit the spring season, you're going to see a lot of field hockey, football, and soccer players coming on the podcast next month, the end of July into August. And so it should be a fun time coming. But yeah, that's where you can find us, all those places.
Awesome, Gabe. Well, we appreciate you coming on, sharing what you've got going on. Love what you're trying to do, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm excited too, because what you're doing is so cool as well. I'm really excited to hopefully have the relationship that continues and allows athletes to filter between the two of us and get opportunities through you as well. So
yeah, that's great. Well, I like I said, applaud what you're doing, and I'm Greg Glynn. We're glad you could tune in, and stay pliable, my friends.
Thanks for listening to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes from today's episode and catch up on recent episodes at pliablemarketing.com. We also encourage you to share topics and guest ideas by emailing our production staff at pliablemarketing@gmail.com. We love hearing from our loyal listeners and athletes who want to grow their brand. So jump in and be part of the podcast, because that's how we roll.